I feel like talking to researchers, like everything sort of cuts off after 2030. Like basically the narrative, by 2030, we will have superintelligence, and that's it. And like what will happen after that? Nobody says, probably nobody knows. Do you think we will have superintelligence by 2030 or like 2032, like around that time? But more importantly, like what future AI systems will look like, that those powerful AI systems, let's say in like 2035, what should we expect?
Absolutely. What a great question to kick off with. So let's start speculating about the future of AI, my favorite pastime. Artificial intelligence right now is growing at this very fast speed where like year to year we see more and more advances. Like it was in 2023 when people started seeing like, oh, can we use AI to solve like basic high school math problems? And they were like, no, this is really hard. Only a few months after, AI started solving those very same high school problems that had stamped AI up until then. And by now, we have resorted to contracting like some of the world's best mathematicians of the caliber of Terence Tao to write down problems that are like hard enough that current AI cannot solve them. And even then, it's starting to solve them very slowly. I don't think that right now it's very good at solving research level math problems, but we're starting to see the signs of it actually being able to accomplish these very impressive feats. I do believe that the reason why we have seen AI figure out how to solve these challenging problems has a lot to do with the scale of the models and the AI paradigm that we have figured out in order to train the models. It does seem to me that this is something that we can keep scaling in the future, and so we should expect that over the next 5 years we will see similarly fast growth in artificial intelligence capabilities to what we have seen so far. This seems to me like the baseline prediction of what you should expect AI to get better and better. Exactly what it means for AI to get better and better, it is a bit unclear, but I will be ready to venture that we're going to see AI that can solve like research-grade problems in mathematics 100%. I will expect that we will already have seen some important open conjectures in mathematics being settled through AI, which is very exciting to me. I do think that it also is going to have many applications all through society. Anything that has to do with automating jobs they're doing right now through computers, that seems to be roughly within reach of what we should expect.
Any digital work that humans do by 2030?
I'm not going to say any at all, but definitely you should expect that all of these jobs are going to be heavily transformed. Like, for example, one thing that I could imagine is automating call centers. That seems to be within reach. People are already working on it. Right now, there's a bit of a reliability issue. I think this will be mostly handled by the end of the decade. Writing low-level code, that also seems within reach. When I have talked to people at large companies, some have told me like, oh, our ambition is like we're going to stop writing code by the end of the year. I think they're very ambitious. I think they're like overly ambitious in that regard. But it will not be that surprising to me if by the end of the decade, like writing code is an abstraction that is handled mostly by AI, and software engineering, the time of software engineers is more focused on higher level decisions of what kind of architecture to implement, how to structure the systems, then reviewing the pull requests that are made by AI mostly. I do still think that the most likely scenario is that there will be a long tail of cognitive capabilities that we haven't quite figured out by the end of the decade. It does seem to me that if we transport ourselves to 10 years back, if you had asked young Jaime about like, oh, what do you think an AI that can essentially pass the Turing test is going to be able to do? And I will be like, well, that's game over, basically. That's an AI that can do everything. And that prediction will have turned out to not be quite true. I will say that right now, the AI that we have access to, like it basically passes the Turing test. You can have a conversation with it as you go with a colleague, and it does a pretty convincing job of mimicking, of like producing, not mimicking, producing natural language. But this is still like quite limited in many other ways. It doesn't have long-term coherence. It gets stuck on very basic steps. It makes very obvious mistakes that humans will 100% notice as mistakes and correct.
Now everyone is talking about agents and giving access to external tools. Do you think by then we will have those agents who are reliably using those tools and executing upon?
I do believe more likely than not that we will have
Will not.
agents. No. I think it's more likely than not that we will have agents that operate independently and can solve for me tasks of the, like, for example, planning a trip. AI can already basically plan a trip. In fact, like, I planned a very lovely trip for later this year where I essentially asked ChatGPT, oh, can you plan a trip for me? And it gave me some options. I gave it some feedback, and then it came up with a very lovely trip. It didn't like actually do the booking of the things itself. I had to do the booking myself. I think that by the end of the decade, like, absolutely, it will do the booking for me. It might still like involve me for some key decision making in places where like where it wants to make sure that it's making the right decision. But otherwise, like, I do expect them to operate with a high degree of independence. Still, like, it's a bit hard to put my finger on exactly what will be missing, but my bet is that it's more likely than not that there will be some things missing. Maybe there's gonna be something that has to do with creativity. Maybe it's something that has to do with long-term planning and agency in the sense of like figuring out what is important to orienting towards like the most important goals it could work with instead of just executing on the goals that it's given. Maybe that's gonna be the part where it gets stuck. It's gonna be a bit hard to say exactly what will stump AI, but so far the trajectory has been we conquer new cognitive capabilities very fast. But still, there are more and more that we do notice, like, oh, you also need this in order to fully automate certain kinds of jobs. So even by the end of the decade, I do think, in my model world, I have huge uncertainty bars around this, of course. You will still be missing like a few key things in order to fully automate AI. On other ways, I do expect this AI to be superhuman on some tasks.
You do not.
I expect it to be superhuman on some tasks. So for example, I did mention this part about math conjecture, an open math conjecture being settled by AI. I think AI is about to revolutionize science. It's going to be a big deal, and potentially it's going to change how we conduct mathematics, how we conduct materials science research, how we do really any kind of scientific endeavor. But even though it's superhuman at those tasks, especially those tasks that humans haven't been like very thoroughly optimized for, like, it might still be missing like this longer tail of cognitive capabilities. One of my favorite graphs and everyone's favorite graphs is the time horizon graph by meter, which is an organization.
It's doubling every 7 months that AI agent can do longer tasks.
Yes,
and it's doubling
in
every
software,
7
this is in concretely for software engineering tasks that are like well defined, and this varies a lot by domain. But in every domain that they have looked into, they have seen this exponentially growing trend on the length of time of tasks that AI can reliably handle. And this to me is like a somewhat compelling illustration of how AI is going to be becoming better and better at solving, at handling all kinds of cognitive problems. But even then, if you look at that graph and you just like naively extrapolate it forward for this very specific domain of software engineering tasks that's very well defined, where like there is a very clear win condition, like it will not be until the end of the decade when you get to what will be 1 month, solving 1 month long task with 50% reliability, which I would say it's at least it's a low bar to meet for AI that can automate like every kind of job.
Do you think it makes sense to do predictions like further, like 35, 40, or it's like complete speculation? We don't even have like data to make reasonable prediction.
I think you can make some predictions. You have to be careful. Right now we live in a very specific regime in which we see this constant growth in the scale of the AI models, and like somewhat predictive, there's still surprising growth in the capabilities of AI models. And I do think that it's not easy, but this is what we do at Epoch. I do think that you can be more informed about what's going to happen by drawing this line farther and see where it takes you. But by the end of the decade, things start getting a bit funky. Why? One of them is because the scale just gets so massive. Right now, the scale of the amount of money that's being spent on the larger infrastructures around AI, like the Memphis XAI cluster, is in the order of tens of billions of dollars, which is a lot, but it's not that large in the context of the whole economy. In the context, for example, the U.S. 30 trillion a year GDP. But if you keep growing the amount of expenditure, doubling it every year, which is roughly what we see right now, is doubling.
Expenditure on building data centers?
Yeah, on hardware, that's right. On
hardware, like producing chips or data centers?
Mainly, the main expenditure for the data centers are the chips. Though in general, I do think you can spend all expenses to grow like 2-3x per year.
2-3x per year.
That's right.
Building more data centers.
Yeah, building larger data centers. The thing here is, if you keep growing it this way, then by the end of the decade, this is gonna reach trillions of dollars. And now it's like, well, if you want to keep growing that further, like, you already need AI that's having a very significant economic effect. You cannot justify investing on the order of tens of trillions of dollars without a very compelling economic case for artificial intelligence. I do think that AI can potentially get there, but there's a very important business model problem to be solved here, and investor convincing work that needs to happen in order to amass that amount of money. I do think that this is one of the reasons why we are going to see, we have this uncertainty, right? Like, we have this forking path. There is the world in which, like, AI lives up to its promise, and it just starts like, this has to be already revolutionizing a lot of the economy in order to justify an investment of tens of trillions of dollars. And I will argue that you need to have an expectation of revenue in the trillions of dollars. You have an expectation of revenue in the trillions of dollars, that's already something you can measure in GDP per year.
If by the end of this decade, big tech companies who develop frontier AI models will not generate trillions of dollars revenue, then basically government investors, they will reconsider the path.
I think they will be hesitant to commit more money into this, or to grow it even more, and this might slow down the scaling of AI. Another reason why we might expect the scaling of AI to slow down after the end of the decade is just the scale of these things is massive, right? Again, if you're building a 10 billion data center, that's already a massive challenge that requires months to years. By the end of the decade, like, if the trend keeps growing in that direction, then we're potentially going to be reaching the trillions of dollars of overnight costs for AI infrastructure, and from there, if you want to keep the same trend, this very crazy trend where expenditures double every year, then, like, you start getting to the tens of trillions of dollars, and suddenly it's like, oh God, this is like 10% of the world economy that you're going to be putting into artificial intelligence infrastructure, which is a lot of commitment, and you really need to be convinced that artificial intelligence has the potential to transform your economy to justify that. And not only that, but also it's just genuinely very hard to build like infrastructure at that scale. It's naturally going to take us longer to build at that scale, just because coordinating all of that influx of money, coordinating all the workers that need to be put to work to build the data centers, to all the production of GPUs that need to happen. There's a lot of moving pieces that you need to address to pull this off, and this requires time.
So potentially, by the end of this decade, we will see the big tech companies generating trillions of dollars of revenue.
They are on trend to that, and this is what they need to do if they want to keep scaling.
So if this happens, then basically all the stakeholders will be considering how to put even more money to scale further that infrastructure.
That's right.
If it shows the trend, okay, it's not necessarily 2030. If it shows the trend, okay, we will get there by like 2035, 2040, they still might consider putting money in, right? Because the trend is obvious, they want to get there, right? Basically, what should happen to really make them think to reconsider these investments? I'm not saying like have AI winter, but like really sort of slow down the pace.
No, absolutely. Like the two things that could convince you to not keep scaling. One of them is seeing that the trend between the relationship between the scale of the models and the capabilities that they achieve. If that breaks down, if that bends down, and people start thinking like, oh, you train a model that's 10 times or 10 times more compute than the previous one, and it's not as good as we would have expected, then that can shake investor confidence. The other part here is just if revenues fail to materialize, like building a $1 trillion business, it's a major order. There's still a lot of room, a lot of steps ahead of AI companies to reach that amount of scale. You cannot just rely on, right now, like I will say that AI is, lots of people are using AI as a convenience, and there's also an important B2B case in the case of coding software, coding agents.
Coding agents, yeah.
That's right. I just think that you will need to figure out some other business cases for artificial intelligence if you want to get there. I do think that people will figure out some really interesting uses for artificial intelligence. Whether that's going to end up being $1 trillion, enough business cases to get to trillions of dollars of revenue a year. My bet would be in yes, but it's like it's a hesitant yes. It's a yes.
Like trillions of dollars, not a joke, and I feel like people, like most people, they don't understand what's coming. You know, like the potential and the impact, and I don't see. It feels like, you know, developers, just like 1% of population, like understand. But like, you know, 99% like have no idea, you know.
100%.
100%. Can we speculate on like potential economic impact it will have? Like how economy you think might change? Will it be like drastic change? You know, we will figure out like those different use cases, and we will see mass layoffs, or it will be more gradual because, you know, like this, because of inertia, and people like really don't like change things. They will be maybe sabotage, maybe some like unions, they will be like, even if job can be automated, but some unions, they will like really fight to keep jobs for humans. Like how do you envision that economic transformation because of powerful AI?
So here's the thing, with artificial intelligence use cases and adoption, it has grown very fast. So when you look at, for example, the adoption of ChatGPT and similar chat platforms, it grows very fast. Like in the last 2 years, they have been able to triple their revenue, their revenue annually, which is pretty impressive. That's an order of magnitude increase over 2 years. I do genuinely believe that if you figure out like an impactful application with artificial intelligence, especially one that doesn't require like any kind of a special equipment, it just requires your computer your computer, then this is going to diffuse quite quickly through society. And the implications of that are massive, because yes, I do expect that many jobs are going to be affected by artificial intelligence. This is going to manifest a lot in people using AI more in their jobs, and they become more productive. This is also gonna result in people being more hesitant to hire junior people, for example. This is something that I do believe it's now being widely discussed in the business world, where you are like seriously considering like, why should you hire an entry role for a job that you can automate with artificial intelligence right now? And maybe it's not going to be that good at the moment, but it's going to be good enough. And then in 6 months, that it is possible that AI is going to improve faster than your junior hire is going to improve at doing that kind of job, given how fast things are moving in artificial intelligence. I think my model expectation again is that by the end of the decade, like you're looking at $1 trillion revenues, you're looking at quite fast adoption of these technologies, and lots of this is going to make a dent in unemployment as well. I think that this can definitely increase unemployment, maybe like 1 percentage point by the end of the decade, even more than that. This is going to create a huge societal response. Of course, people are going to start to be really worried about artificial intelligence. They're going to want to fight for their rights. In some cases, they're going to get it, but technology marches very fast. This technology has a very fast cycle of adoption, especially again the remote, let's call it like the remote only applications, and those are already enough to cause like a very major transformation of society.
Basically, some population, like recent graduates, some knowledge workers, they will have hard time to basically find themselves in the economy, but more senior people, experience or have like deep expertise in some fields, at least at that point, they still will be fine, but not necessarily in the future, but like in 5-10 years from now, they probably still be fine.
Which is not obvious because one of the things that we also have somewhat consistently observed with artificial intelligence is that it's much better at augmenting unskilled workers than it is at augmenting people with very senior positions. Yeah. Like for example, there was this study where like they got like some senior software engineers to experiment with AI. This was also by Meter, and they actually found that AI slowed them down at completing tasks. And this is at odds with like the experience of many other people, especially like less experienced developers, that through AI have been able to code like much more than they used to, that they were able to before. And I do think this is a somewhat general phenomena that AI has this asymmetric effect on and it helps much more people who are maybe not that familiar with a particular for a particular domain of application. Well, people who already know their stuff is like, oh, they notice they already can do the thing better than AI, so it doesn't help them.
So do you think
much.
there will be like new jobs? Like so some people say that okay, there will be like new jobs.
100%. I do expect that this is going to grow a lot the economy on average and create lots of jobs. The problem is that it's also going to create like a lot of replacement. Like there's going to be industries that over a year just become obsolete. Again, like call centers.
Call centers. What else?
What else? It might be. What else might be here? Might become obsolete over a short period of time, and data entry jobs seems something important. Graphic designers, jobs where like you don't require a lot of expertise to evaluate the output, but require a lot of and that mostly can be done remotely and consist of a client ask for thing X and you have to deliver thing X. Those are the jobs that seem to me the ones that are most at risk. For jobs that require expertise to evaluate the output, for example, lawyers, coders, medical professionals, there it seems that they will also be transformed in that through AI you're going to be able to be much more productive, but there's going to be still this very important role of human professionals to become involved, at least as a signal of quality, and so that they are able to verify like, oh yeah, this output is good. I do think that in the short term at least, this is going to be a hard barrier to overcome, even if just for reasons for trust alone, but also genuinely I do think that this is going to help with quality at least a little bit, at least for a little bit longer. Eventually you get to a point where like everyone just becomes convinced that the AI is like better at your job than most lawyers and most medics. So why are you even interacting with an human lawyer at that point? You just use AI.
Somewhat short term it will be useful, but eventually even like lawyers, doctors, right? Everything will be automated. I'd like to switch like our conversation to like reflect on geopolitical impact. I actually was watching your recent interview and you like mentioned that many companies, they rely on TSMC and it seems like I had the impression from your interviews that the chip production, the hardware part is like the most crucial. Let's say China sees that US is on the path to superintelligence, and whoever has superintelligence, they basically have all the power in the world, probably forever. And of course, they don't want to like only US have superintelligence. And if they see, okay, if US like blocks them from having that superintelligence, they might decide to invade Taiwan, right? And cut down everything. Like, I'm just wondering in terms of geopolitical implications, when like things will start like really like heating up, and it will be the case who like will be owning this world. Do you see those really drastic geopolitical changes.
I have lots of comments and things I want to challenge your frame in several ways. Maybe the part that I will start, that is the most important. In order to develop AI, in order to deploy it, you need compute. This is right now very crucial. The more compute that you have, the better AI that you're going to have access to, and you're going to be able to deploy it at a larger scale. This is making so compute is going to become this incredibly valuable resource, especially to the extent that this is going to become a motor for the economy. Then every state is going to need to have a very long think about how they're going to be able to secure compute access for their citizens and their economy. I do believe that states will be asking this question right now of how they're going to be able to secure it and making these bets that put them in a position to have access to compute and to have certain compute independence, or to at least think about the geopolitical implications of having your compute being hosted by other nations, and how this is going to affect your relationship with these other nations. I don't think that AI is going to be this you take everything market. I don't think it's going to be, and I do think that people are going to wise up to this possibility. It is still the case that even if you are 1 year behind on artificial intelligence, you still can remain somewhat competitive with the frontier. We're seeing this in China. I do expect that this is roughly going to continue in the future. Like, you can afford to be a little behind the others, and this somewhat diffuses the tensions of a race towards artificial intelligence. At least I'm hoping that people will wise up to this reality of the technology. What do I expect will be the implications of this need for compute? I think that we're going to see people build more. I think that people are going to be making larger investments on energy infrastructure and GPU infrastructure in order to secure these important resources. And I'm hoping actually that we can have enough distribution around the world on building these resources that this somewhat helps de-escalate some tensions about who has access and control to this compute.
So if US builds those data centers across the world, then so basically they might give access to those data centers to their allies?
That depends on the perspective of each state. Each state is going to want to have access to compute. They might anticipate that access to compute is going to be as crucial for their economy as access to the internet is right now. And so they will be making investments right now in order to either secure compute or in order to have some deals in place that allow them to acquire compute from other jurisdictions, similar to right now how we handle electricity, how we handle gas, etc. I do expect that there's going to be a large commodification of compute in the future. We're going to start treating it as this very important resource right now in somewhat speculative terms, but in the future, because you actually see that this is very important for your economy. And I do think that having compute all around the world, it helps diffuse some of these tensions versus all of your computing infrastructure depends on a few data centers that are built in the United States. Then that creates a lot of tension. Then it's well, this is very uncomfortable for us because the United States is going to get to decide the future of our economies, and if they decide to cut access to this compute, then we're going to be in a very awkward position. So I do think actually it's positive for more people to build this computing infrastructure rather than create this very uncomfortable situation. You did mention the situation with China and with Taiwan. Right now, the compute pipeline is very concentrated, and as you said, 90% of more than 90% of all the compute in the world is being produced in Taiwan by TSMC. Pretty much, this is a very unstable and awkward situation as well, that people are trying very hard to correct, to be clear. Like both China and the US are making very large investments to try to build alternative supply chains so that they can produce their own compute. Haven't succeeded so far. Seems to be very hard to compete with the level of expertise that exists in Taiwan, and there is a powerful there seems to be a powerful reason for it. Otherwise, like other companies will have already developed elsewhere, right? Or even TSMC will have successfully expanded elsewhere, which they've started to do, but not as successfully as their factories in Taiwan. Do I expect that this could be a motive for war? I think in the next 10 years it's more likely that China will invite Taiwan for historical reasons, that they will because of compute supremacy reasons. But definitely it doesn't help, and particularly what this might lead is to, I'm definitely not an expert in geopolitics, but if you allow me to go full crank mode here, what I could speculate is that this could lead to an escalation. So I could imagine a world where by 2030, the United States is already seeing a 1% to 5% extra growth in their yearly GDP, yearly GDP growth, which is directly, which can be directly attributed to AI because of AI. So they have started to realize like, oh shit, like we really need compute. And if Taiwan factories are destroyed, this is going to severely hamper our economy. And so they might make a very strong commitment that if Taiwan gets invaded, they will retaliate in order to dissuade China. But China might still invade Taiwan anyway, because they have these historical ambitions where like they see Taiwan as part of China and they see themselves entitled to Taiwanese territory. So they might do it anyway, and then this will put the United States in this very awkward position where like, well, we committed to help Taiwan in this case because otherwise we had to create an incentive, and now we have to go through with it. And that could be a really bad thing to happen, a war between the US and China.
If we see like huge impact on the GDP growth because of AI, of course, the US doesn't want to lose that opportunity, right? And then stakes are very high.
Building computing infrastructure all around the world, building offshoring factories outside of Taiwan so we have a more distributed supply chain. It seems to me as an important geopolitical intervention that we could do to diffuse some of these tensions. Maybe don't quote me on this. I'm not an expert on geopolitics, but as an expert on AI, it does seem to me that this could be the case.
Can you elaborate for me, just to make sure that I understand, and people who will be watching this also will understand. When you say that building that infrastructure across the world, is it like only US is building? Is like several countries are building? Like how that will help to de-escalate the tension?
I want more countries other than the US to be building. Like no offense to the US, but I will be more comfortable in a world in which like we're not concentrating all of the power in a single jurisdiction, but rather we are trying to build it on other places. I don't think this is a form of power. And distribution of power is a good way of creating a system of checks and balances, where you do not have like this central node that if something unthinkable happens, then will put the rest of the world in a very awkward position. I don't think that there will be like a single AI system that is going to like very quickly take over the world. I do think this is unlikely. This is difficult to rule out, but I do think that the world usually doesn't work that way. It's very rare that a single loop of accumulating power like grows unchecked and takes over the rest of resources, with some caveats here and there. So actually, I don't know, you can also just look at how AI is being developed right now, and you see like, oh, there isn't like a single company which is clearly ahead of the rest. Like I would say like OpenAI, okay, OpenAI is ahead of the rest, but it's not like 5 years ahead of the rest. Like the others seem to be able to consistently match AI capabilities with 6 months to 1 year lag, 100%. Even when you look at other jurisdictions, as in China, for example. And that to me is an indication of, well, it's not such a loop-sided race where there's such a strong concentration mechanic. I think it's more likely than not that we will see a lot of variety in the future. There's also a lot of advantages to having AI that is varied and that adapts to particular purposes. This is also one of the reasons why humans have become like so successful as a species. That we have created a system that allows us to specialize and allows us to create specific organizations that are well suited to specific purposes. And artificial intelligence might also in the future be developed with a lot more variety. And there is definitely like a very huge incentive to let people have more control over their instances of artificial intelligence. There's a lot of demand for, oh, I want artificial intelligence that's like that's very helpful for my particular kind of job, and like that responds in a particular kind of way, and that leads to some to customization, leads to diversity. I don't think that a monolithic thing is the future that we get by default. Also just looking at how history and the world tends to shape itself. It does seem that it abhors monotony and it loves variety.
With AI, it's so different. Humanity never faced that situation that we're facing right now, like with AI, right? And one like crucial innovation that accelerates so fast that others might not even catch up.
There's a very important question about like how quickly can your AI models self-improve, so to speak. How far can you go if you start from like a basis of like, okay, you develop an AI model that suddenly has some kind of like new capability, and then like having that new capability where like the rest of your competitors are like 3 months behind you. What can you make with that 3-month lead? Is that 3-month lead enough for you to gain an unsurmountable advantage? And it's like, that seems very, very hard. This is like not a lot of time. And even if the only thing that you have is an AI that is like slightly better at software engineering tasks than all of your competitors, like it seems very wild to me that you could expect that to translate to an unsurmountable geopolitical advantage. Like this is very wild to me. In particular, it does seem that no matter what is the angle in which you're going to be better than the rest, like you're eventually going to saturate that advantage. Like let's imagine that what you can do is like you can spin up researchers very fast to help you improve your AI architectures. Then you're going to get to the point where like these AI researchers are just bottleneck on like how much compute they have access to, and it's like, oh sure, we have ideas. We have a wealth of ideas and which experiments we will run if we had access to more compute, so we can run more experiments, but we still need that compute, and that kind of thing is going to bottleneck your growth until the rest of the economy catches up. As a matter of fact, like what I expect is that if you are an AI company that suddenly has figured out like one very useful application for AI, you're going to be very well incentivized to try to get other people to use your AI to adopt it faster. Like for example, I think this is going to be particularly important for the hardware world. I do expect that as we get to this AI that has these very useful scientific applications, then OpenAI is going to be OpenAI or whoever the AI companies are going to be very enthusiastic about like, oh, please, TSMC, adopt our AI, speed up your processes because we need more GPUs in order to run more experiments and in order to deploy your systems at an even bigger scale. So you really want the rest of the economy to adopt your systems. And that naturally leads to this diffusion of capabilities and this world in which, like, don't get me wrong, you can get like faster and faster growth over time. Like I do actually think that artificial intelligence has the promise of getting out of what I'm gonna call like stagnating growth rates. Like we have seen this somewhat constant growth rates in frontier economies for the last 70 years. I do think that the AI can get us out of that and can kick us back into hyperbolic growth, which has been the norm for like most of history. But it seems that right now it's not quite happening. I think AI can get us back into that. But I think it's more likely to get us through to there. So what I will call is a distributed adoption of AI technologies and like a non-localized self-improvement loop and it's going to take us that is more likely to happen through this non-localized improvement loop than through a localized self-improvement loop where like, oh, a single company with limited resources is going to be able to like quickly outstrip the rest of society. That seems to me like a very tall order to happen. You are going to be quickly bottlenecked by whatever are your complement inputs that you lack, and you really want the rest of the world to produce more of those complement inputs for you to keep growing.
Speaking of architectures, now like we're close to optimizing transformers, and I'm just wondering, do you think that transformers as an architecture is enough to get us to super powerful, super intelligent AI, or you think there should be like some other very key, crucial innovation, as like transformer was for AI field in 2017, right?
Yeah.
Should we expect like some like this? Do we need these very crucial innovations like transformer or like transformer-like innovations? Or you think with transformer we can get to superintelligence?
So there are many ways that I can answer this question. One of the things that I will point out is compute efficiency is something that grows quite fast. Like the amount of compute that you need to match a given level of performance is reducing exponentially year after year. Like you need 3 times less compute to reach the same level of performance, which is a bit what we saw with DeepSeek, for example. Or even now, if you look at the open source models that OpenAI just released, like they are not that big. They are like arguably the small model maybe was trained with like GPT-3 orders of compute if you ignore at least the distillation, the data distillation part, and it still seems to achieve like a relatively impressive performance compared to the models that we had 5 years ago, for example. Why have we been able to increase data efficiency so fast? It's not clear, but one of the factors here has been improvements to the architectures that we use and the ways that we do training, and also the quality of the data that we have access to and that we're using for training. The transformer was an important innovation. Doesn't seem to have been a whole explanation to this. We tried to quantify like how important has been the transformer for explaining compute efficiency
you guys like
gains.
tried
Yes,
to okay. And what conclusion did you come?
So what we came to, I don't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it was an important innovation, but it doesn't fully explain like all of the advances that we have seen in artificial intelligence by a mile. Like maybe in the last 10 years, maybe it explained like, on the order of 10% of the compute efficiency gains that we have seen, but not all of them, not all of them 100%. It's not only on the back of the transformer that we're gonna be keeping up with this trend of increased compute efficiency gains. There seems to be like many other components that are fitting into that.
Such as like algorithm or like what?
I feel like we don't yet have a really good understanding of it, at least at Epoch. What will be my guesses, that I'm going to frame this as guesses. I do think that we need to investigate them more. One of them is data quality. Seems quite important, that we have learned a lot about like what kind of data it's more useful to train on. There's also just like a myriad of like small little improvements that we have learned along the way. Mixture of expert models, architecture seems to be one of the things that people are using right now. Chinchilla scaling and like what is the right ratio of data to parameter counts that you should use to maximize your performance. We have definitely moved past chinchilla scaling at this point. Reasoning training is now the latest thing. We try to quantify also a little like how useful has reasoning training been so far.
Do you have any like insights yet, or like still like working?
We wrote a newsletter issue on this a couple of months back. Again, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it does seem to have been something important. Though again, there isn't like a single thing that has like completely dominates the compute efficiency equation. It does seem to be more of a combination of different improvements that complement each other and that help drive like this very impressive trend of increased compute efficiency.
So currently we have models basically like a version by version, like do training, like all the post training and like release to the world. When it comes to continual learning. And it seems to me like I really love this idea, like AI like constantly like learning and self-improving, and like to me it's like real superintelligence, like by like like no doubt. What's your take on like continual learning? How far we are from there, or you think ACI superintelligence will be basically like version by version AI system?
My take on continual learning is it's helpful. It will definitely happen at some point. There's definitely demand for AI that can learn on its job, and that can use what it has learned from past interactions and integrate it deeply into its system to be more helpful to users. I don't think this is going to be the game changer that people think is going to be. Like, it is important, but it's not as important as developing a system that in the first place has these very advanced cognitive capabilities and that can leverage like large amounts of compute. Maybe this is one heuristic that you can think about, which is that if you allow to have continual learning, then like how much more compute are you going to be able to leverage through it? It's like maybe some, because then you're going to be able to like reuse past training and channel it into your current training run. You can like train for longer without hitting diminishing returns. You can dynamically probe to get data there where like you're at your weakest, where your AI models struggle the most. But I don't think this is something that gives you access to exponentially more effective compute, so to speak. From that perspective, like it will be somewhat surprising if like this leads to like a really massive improvement in capabilities. I think it helps a lot, again, with convenience. I think it helps a lot with like making this more usable day to day. Like this seems to be like a very handy feature. I would love for my chat agents to remember more carefully what I've told them and to integrate more deeply in my preferences. Context. But again, I don't think that this is going to be that massive or like something that's going to unlock radically new capabilities that we don't have now. Like you already have continual learning to some extent. It's kind of crappy right now, but when I talk to ChatGPT, it remembers my past conversations. I can even like fine tune it or like a specific data sets and applications that I care about. Like it doesn't seem to me a radical departure from what we have now. It will happen 100%. I don't think that this is what's going to mark the difference between the AI that we have now and AI that can do some new kind of very impressive thing.